Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily argue or cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So we have one question. We have two questions that maybe they are related. So with your permission, I'm going to read out the question that you asked. And it's like this. So is it normal during the spiritual way to have depressive periods, like depressive waves, during which the trauma, sorrows of the past come to the surface? That's one part of the question. Second part goes, is it the grace that brings them to light, to clean them up in a way? What is the best attitude to adopt? Is the third question, really. In these cases, is it to relive the emotions, go through them until they run out, or try to understand, or try to get high and just observe, and so on? Okay, all right, let's just try and deal with these questions. There are many causes of depression. It's difficult to identify for every person the cause. We can only go to a general cause. And the general cause will really be a feeling of isolation. When we think that we are an individual in juxtaposition to everything else, and we have to struggle against a world where we feel there are unfair odds, then many things come up from the past. And these are triggered by current moments and issues. Is it necessary to identify what they are? I think it's helpful to identify the moment that the depressive wave started and what might be the general cause of it. So, is it part of a spiritual journey to do this? Not really. Not really. The spiritual journey will be a journey toward a different way of thinking, where we can recognize in ourselves and others only one thing, and that is the Supreme, the all-perfect entity that sits within us and sits within all. So all the scriptures, the Upanishadic scriptures, Bhagavad Gita, they all emphasize this one thing, that is to see the self, that is the divine self in all beings, and all beings in the self. That removes grief. That removes also other things associated with it, hate, anger, and so on, all the negative emotions that come up that are damaging to ourselves and to others. These all come up from the unconscious area. So what is the unconscious area? It's the area where conscious memories get deposited. Every action, every movement, every mental movement settles on the unconscious area and forms a kind of library. And this library, we don't have to make any reference to, of course. If we do it deliberately, it's called memory. But inevitably, most of our waking life, not to mention dream life, is all the unconscious impressions coming to the surface. The very important thing is to be able to notice them and catch them before they multiply and descend, and they're all associated with a script. The script might go something like this. I feel lonely today, and nobody visited me. I seem to have some problem, nobody likes me, I wonder why. I feel defective, and poor me, and so it goes on. A compounded internal conversation can take place. So what would we do in spiritual life? First of all, we notice it. The fact of noticing it means that I am separate from any emotion that comes up through the mind. That's the very handy nature of our Vedanta philosophy that says, I'm not the mind, and I'm not any activity, I'm not any of the waves that come up, that come and go in the mind. But how to overcome them when they are so overwhelming, and when we might feel hopeless, when we might feel that we are, we feel overwhelmed. There's a common feeling that comes with depression, that you feel overwhelmed, either by feelings or activities or whatever they are. And so the antidote will be, can we consciously produce counterwaves? It's not easy if we don't have a philosophy. If we don't understand the principle that the divine sits inside everything. After this talk, I'm going to give a talk about 11:30 anyway, to the Society of Friends, otherwise known as the Quakers. During the Irish famine of 1886, 1884 actually, was it 1884 or 1894? I have to look it up. Anyway, whatever the famine date was, it was a tremendous blow. There were thousands and thousands, millions of people who were effective and physically affected, poverty and so on. Their mental condition must have been depressed also. They must have felt in a hopeless condition with nobody looking after them, and this prospect of their children and their family withering away and dying through starvation. So every physical deprivation will come with an accompanying mental deprivation also, and a feeling of utter helplessness and hopelessness. I felt myself, coming from Paris to London, some element of that because I missed my flight. And in missing the flight, I was late for the flight. I was late for boarding. My fault entirely. I should have gone straight to the gate, having gone through security and so on. I got sent all the way back through the security, through the passport office, everything like that. Had to get my passport stamped again, way back, and lined up in the wrong queue. Air France, couldn't find where it was. And I must have walked through the whole of Charles de Gaulle Airport. And eventually lined up at the ticketing office and had to purchase another ticket. It's not as simple as that. You're given a waiting ticket to go to the billeting office and all the rest of it. Anyway, as I got there, the lady was very helpful. But during the process, I could feel an element of panic coming. And so I stopped a little bit and said, all right, if you manage to get another ticket, it's okay. If you don't, it's okay. There's always some plan. But the law of the universe is behind me, looking after me. If I didn't remember that, I would have been in a total state of helplessness and feeling overwhelmed and hopeless. Because every direction I turned, there seemed to be some kind of obstacle. So for a single moment, I felt that condition. Then having stood back a little bit, my philosophy, the principles of my philosophy came in. Philosophy is not something that is a dry set of principles. That's worthless. It has to have some practical implication. And what is the practical implication? Behind everything that we see is the Lord's face. Sometimes it appears as lost luggage, because of course when I got to London, I couldn't find my luggage either. And then another moment was there, potentially, because the luggage arrived. I looked at the board, I must have misread the board, and the Paris flight, it was conveyor belt number 8. And I went to conveyor belt number 8. I didn't see anybody there. I thought, that's okay, I'll go to the washroom. Came back from it, still nobody there. But by that time, I could see, and I waited by the wrong conveyor belt, number 9. And there were lots of bags going around. I couldn't find my bag. It was the wrong flight. Then I couldn't find anybody to assist me. The rising sense of hopelessness comes in now, and helplessness, nobody to help me. I feel deserted. Where are you, Lord? Where's my baggage? What will I do? This is an internal conversation that we're having with ourselves. We have to replace it with another internal conversation that says, no, you won't desert me. Lord, you are here. And be patient. Somebody will come along. And surely somebody came along after asking another man, and he was busy dealing with the Dubai flight and wasn't interested in me at all. In fact, he ignored me totally. He was busy sorting his bags out. My concern was not for lost bags. My concern was for those people waiting, trying to receive me. I would delay them. And already I had delayed them because my flight had been postponed. My arrival was postponed. I was anxious that I would inconvenience them. Anyway, they only waited about 10 minutes, as it was in the end. And I was dressed, half my clothing was on me, and running here and there. I broke out into a huge sweat, something like a portable steam bath I was wearing, So all of these moments, but they are momentary. And you mentioned this depression coming in waves. Yes, they come in waves, but they are accompanied by a script, an internal script, that compounds the depression or the awkward situation. We have to replace it with a different script. We have to insert our philosophy that says that you are the mother, my mother, if you're a devotee, you're looking after me constantly. I have nothing to worry. I just have to be a little patient, and you'll come and attend to me and look after me. And repeat my mantra constantly to practice the presence of the divine all the time. And the waves will pass. And they'll be substituted by some kind of unseen, intangible sense of peace that sooner or later something will come along. A man came along and he told me, oh, no. He said, oh, you should still wait for the baggage because you see the sign, it hasn't arrived. And I knew, no, it's not right. People should be here waiting. And there's nobody here. Then he said, let me look at your ticket. And then he said, oh, that arrived at conveyor belt 4. So then I went down to conveyor 4, no luggage there. My bag was put on the side somewhere. We think in words, and those words have corresponding concepts, and they can be doubtful, they can be fearful, they can be full of temptation, or they can be full of glory, positivity, divine light and life, taking all these things as a kind of adventure, but it requires an adjustment. The first reaction you cannot avoid. The first reaction, let's say panic or depression, you cannot avoid. But the next wave you can deal with. The next wave you can bring up something new. And insert through words again. Strong, true, wise, full, free. These kinds of affirmations. Now in business terms, people who are positive thinkers, the 1960s, 1970s were full of positive thinkers. Norman Vincent Peale, with Donald Trump's tutor, and Dale Carnegie, and all these people, and now Tony Robbins, I think. And all of these are advocating positive thinking. But they're missing one vital component. They're not bringing it to the most profound, deepest spiritual level. They're saying quite rightly, change your thinking, but the thinking still has a motive with it. And the motive comes with negative baggage as well, no matter how positive you think. Because there's an expectation in it. I want, I don't have. +1, -1, you're going nowhere. So we have to be utterly convinced that the destiny and the way and the path is already full and free and perfect, and is a kind of drama that we can enact, and we can enjoy the process also. We have to repeat that constantly, and bring our attention back to it all the time. We have to practice that. That means the principles are understood theoretically, in an abstract way, in principle, but we have to catch it up with a real understanding. When we say the mother of the universe, or the father of the universe, or the divine companion, or the divine friend, whatever your chosen ideal is with me here and now, there's no good saying it unless we mean it, and meaning means feeling it. I feel the presence, and every face I look at will be one of God's face. And every movement that we make is divine energy. In this way, we combat all negativity. And all activity has energy behind it. But there's only one energy. We can read it in a book, doesn't have any impact. We have to feel it. And we have to experience it. And we have to delight in it. The more we do that, the more we'll counter our depression. Is it useful to find out the exact cause of it? It may be temporarily useful to find out what triggered it in, to make a counter movement. But a counter movement is necessary. It's not that we have to go and rake up these emotions from the past, that kind of clearing. That's the second part of your question. That may be a psychological technique that some psychologists might use. Go to the source. But there was a useful conversation that I witnessed once with Krishnamurti and Jungian psychologists. And he asked a very pertinent question. Is it more useful to go back to the past conditions and find out exactly the moment where this trouble arose and replay it and replay it and replay it, compounding the negativity? Or is it more useful to say, why not, what next? And put something new in and build that up. This is called, technically in yoga, it's called abhyasa yoga. That is constant practice, constant remembrance. And the more we practice that, the more conviction arises from that. The more we say our mantra, the closer we get in feeling to the divine, the more we see this everywhere, in every circumstance, in every scene, in every person. Because the cause of our depression, we might trace back to an unkind person, or we might trace back to a tragic event, or we might trace it back to general conditions, or we might trace it back to something that surfaces from our childhood. Inevitably, it's there anyway. Everybody has something called an original wound, and these fall into three categories. The theological faith, hope, and charity is there. Faith, hope, and love, we can say. So either somebody feels hopeless and depression sets in, or we feel distrusting and depression can set in, or we feel unloved and depression can set in. We can always trace it back to these three things. So how do we deal with it? Why don't we trust in God? Why don't we trust in the divine? Why don't we trust in the divine providence and let go? And let the Lord of the universe carry us? Or why don't we feel the Lord is not a bad investor? He's invested life in me and exhibits love. And we love God because God is lovable. Doesn't charge anything for beating the heart or allowing the lungs to pump, or replacing the cells of the body, or giving us necessary intelligence and resources. In the Maslow hierarchy of needs, most people in the first world countries are nicely catered for. All right, in many cities, there's a homeless problem and so on. There are social problems everywhere, no doubt. Yes. But generally speaking, most people statistically will be better off than somebody with no shoes and no food in Africa, where approximately 60, in some countries, even as much as 80% of children are malnourished. We don't have that problem. In fact, we go to McDonald's and become malnourished there through obesity. So these are resources that we have. It's not an accident that we were born at a certain geographic location in a certain historical era And these are moments for thankfulness. And depression doesn't have that component, doesn't have that part. Because depression, anger, all these emotions are centered on a psychophysical I, a body-mind complex, assuming that I am an actor and profiteer. As soon as I declutch from that and say, I'm no longer an actor, nor am I a profiteer, I'm not the one that's doing things, I'm running on borrowed energy, I'm simply an instrument for divine grace to flow. As soon as I declutch myself from this identity, which we generally call egoism, as soon as I do that, I immediately find peace. As soon as I'm able to register the true nature of the universe that comes to us as unregistered waves, immediately illumination follows. The Ashtavakra Gita mentions something very interesting. If you know the fundamental subtle elements and their behavior, illumination immediately follows. Freedom immediately follows. As soon as we recognize the nature of the waves, immediately the realization on the other side follows. So we have to cultivate that more and more. And we have to use as many devices as we possibly can. To know this is a strange thing for most people, and it's a difficult thing to understand in practice. For this reason, take every single tool that is presented to us. It could be religious singing. It could be recitation of mantras. It could be ritualistic activities such as puja. It could be reading scriptures and meditating on it. Lectio Divina is a Benedictine system that says we pick up any inspiring book and we open it, and the Benedictines use the Psalms. They open it randomly, and there some phrase may catch your eye, and then some word may catch your eye, and then you now go into this and start meditating. There may be an example of this. So, for example, the place whereon thou stands is holy ground is a passage from Exodus. Wherever we are at this moment is holy ground, and I'm reading a passage from The Art of Meditation, Joel Goldsmith. It says, wherever we are at this moment is holy ground. That's why we take shoes off. In this awareness, we can relax and let the Father, that is the divine principle, reveal its plan for us. Because God is not a bad investor, is my comment. That being, which in Christianity, Judaism, Islam is called God the Father, is infinite, and that infinity manifests itself through us as our activity, whether it be that of a religious minister, or a physician, or a lawyer, or nurse, teacher, healer, housewife, businessman, or mechanic. The work assigned to us today may not be of our choosing, but if instead of kicking against the pricks, we remember that God is working out its plan on earth, and that we are here only to show forth the glory of that divinity, then there will be nothing limited, confined, or finite about our life or activity, and that means we're living life with a sense of purpose. And if you live your life with a sense of purpose, that overrides any feeling which is egocentric, which is centered around poor me, or my depressed condition, or even my anger, or my jealousy, or my pride, or any of these negative things. So the formula is very simple. And it is put in the language, the yoga philosophy puts it in the language of evolutionary forces, gunas. That where we find egocentric waves coming up, because depression will inherently be egocentric. This is not a criticism or a blaming, it's just a statement of fact. If I sink into the dark depths of depression, we might say our mental condition is characterized by tamas, darkness. And that really disables us to the point of not being able to move. There are depressive conditions like that. We don't feel we can actually do anything. Some severe cases, you'll lie in bed and not do anything. Severe case of depression. And then that compounds and compounds and compounds, and eventually ends up in giving up completely. Another way of saying that is, I have no purpose. I can't see any direction in my life. If you find a direction in life, you elevate it. You go up one gear. You go up to the next level, characterized by intense activity. It's called rajas. Still characterized by egocentricity, but much better than tamas. At least you're doing something. You may be setting goals, you may be getting up, you may be doing something. In other words, you can elevate it to the point of occupational therapy, otherwise called karma yoga. Karma yoga is occupational therapy. Keeping yourself busy, focusing on some activities, and sweetened by dedicating these activities to God, or at least being mindful of the unit activities that you're doing. And in that mindfulness, you're concentrating on this present moment, not the past. And depression is, as you point out in your question, to do with the past, bringing these up. If we leave the mind to itself, all these things will come up from the past. All these ghosts will visit us and demand their attention. Don't block them. Allow them to come if they want. And then say, please stay, have a cup of tea, but you need to go soon because I have new friends. Strength and truth and beauty and goodness and love. How do you put those things in? And there'll be a complaint from the old friends. Well, wait, we used to be friends of yours. Yes, I know. We have outgrown you. Thank you very much for your playtime when I was small, but it's gone. Now I have new friends, positive friends, and I use this present moment to put one in, another one, and another one, using a script of my own. Instead of saying, poor me, I say, what a glory. Lord, you are everywhere. Lord, you are within me. Lord, you are in every face I see. Lord, you are in every movement of every hand. Lord, you are in the sky. You are in the sun. You are in the moon. You are in the air that I breathe. You are in the oceans. You are in the waters. You are in the flowers, in the trees. You are in the building materials of a house, because the ground on which you stand is holy ground. You can take any passage you like and meditate on that passage. You'll find something profound in your life. And if you do it with enough faith, you'll see randomly opening a book will bring exactly the inspiration you require. Because God knows what you want. As soon as you try to solve the problem by yourself, the universe agrees. It becomes compliant. All right, you carry on. When you're done, you call me. So many prayers are like that. The Bhagavad Gita says there are 4 types of people who pray. One person is in sheer desperation. They have no other recourse. And then the second person just wants to do some improvement in their life. Another person wants knowledge. Another person wants wealth. But the best of all devotees will be you're worshipping that entity for its own sake, loving that entity because it is lovable, because you recognize its hand everywhere, investing life in you. As soon as that attunement comes, you don't have to tend to depression. It goes by itself. There was somebody who, in a discussion, it was in a car, he said, you see, my guru told me I have to intensify my tapasya, but I'm doing everything I can and I feel pressurized. And then I said to him, but are you a devotee? Yes, I'm a devotee. I said, are you somebody who loves God? Oh yeah, I love God. I said, supposing you intensify your love of God, you don't have to do anything else. all this struggle you can leave off. Because that saturating the mind with love of God will immediately displace everything else. All the negativity will be displaced and by itself, without attacking it, without repressing it, without figuring out a technique to handle it and deal with it. So this in yogic language is elevating the mind now to sattva, taking it to the next level, going from tamas to rajas to sattva. And in sattva, there's no egoistic position. It's all purity of the mind. It's all truth. It's all goodness. It's all love. It's all positivity. It's all concern for the other. Until you clean the mind, and what was the ego now becomes a wonderful opening, like a keyhole. You go to a garden, and you see a small keyhole, a walled garden. You don't know what's behind. Something glorious must be behind. And you just see a glimpse of what is there, maybe a tree or a flower through the keyhole. Then as you approach it, the whole vista opens up before you. And you open the door and the garden is yours. How wonderful. So by cultivating this quality, more and more and more, we displace all the other things. Yesterday I was telling somebody, what is the minimum requirement for freedom or salvation? Minimum. We don't want the minimum, but minimum. 51% sattva, 49% other things. Play a game of guiding thought so that sattva dominates, and then play more so that sattva saturates. And the mind becomes full, the mind becomes illumined, it becomes pure and full and free. It becomes a reflection of what is already in there. It becomes a beaming light everywhere, and has spontaneous love and concern, the spirit of generosity for everyone. So this requires practice, but the mind is quite stubborn, and no matter how you make any effort, the mind says, I'm happier being depressed. There are some people who are happy being depressed. There's a humorist who thinks that the English have a tendency toward that, so to say. How are you? Not too bad. Not too bad. It could be worse, and it definitely could be better, but not too bad is the normality. Why don't you say it's glorious? It's wonderful. I'm alive. I feel joyful. I feel well. On what basis? On the basis that the divine is within me and within you and with every person and place and event in every scene. Catch it nicely. See it. See it in one thing and go on to the next thing. See it in that. See it in that. See it in that. We had a retreat day yesterday. One of the exercises was we're going down to the sea. The sea is not far away, 5 minutes walk. And on the way, you can see the divine glory on the way. Normally, you don't see it. Normally, you're walking to the sea and thinking of all your domestic problems, all your difficulties, all your relationships with other people, all the political difficulties, all the warfare, all the poverty, everything. You can saturate your mind with, you'll be spoiled for choice. You tune into the BBC, it's there. You tune into RTE or OTE, and it's there. Wherever you tune. Because no news is good news. It doesn't sell. People are happy to be depressed. Sounds funny. They like that condition. Poor me. But you see, it has its telling effect. It has its telling effect on dragging the mind down. And it has its telling effect on dragging the body down. So these are some thoughts in relation to this subject. It's an important subject. And I'll just read the question out just to make sure we've covered all the bases. So your question again says, is it normal during the spiritual way to have depressive periods? All your activity, we're all on the spiritual way. Will we find moments of depression and anger? Yes. Is it natural? Yes. Why is it natural? Because we are dealing with the unconscious mind that has been cultivated to the point of negativity. From the day we are born, we don't come out of the womb laughing. We come out crying. And there it's all downhill from there, if you like. So soon a child realizes that no matter how much nurturing it has as a baby, it will soon realize, even as a baby, there's something called colic. There's something called hunger. Some gap will always be there. But children are very optimistic. Children are wonderful. But even children fall down, they scrape their knee, they have to be comforted. They learn as they grow that life is full of joys as well as sorrows. Both are there. And they desperately want the happiness and joy. And a child can be provided with it because a child has a childlike attitude. Going to the beach, the child splashes around in the water and plays. The parent says, don't get wet. See, the parent wants to spoil it all. The parent also should say, let me splash around like a child, why not? Let me find my inner child in psychological language, enjoying the feeling of the water, enjoy all the moments that normally will escape me. You do that constantly, do that habitually. Then turn around and say, what became of depression? What became of my unhappiness? What became of my awkward moments? It's because you didn't have them for breakfast. You didn't nurture them. You didn't digest them and regurgitate them. You see, animals work well because although cows chew the cud, they have 4 stomachs, they have to bring it up again and again. It's not the cud of resentment. We bring up the cud of resentment and chew it for hours and hours and days on end and years. Forgive and forget. We were talking yesterday about somebody, see? And they say, yes, I studied the Vedanta philosophy, yoga and all that. I forgive, but I cannot forget. Well, if you can't forget, you never forgave. So I forgive you now, but my goodness. And then they bring up the past. Leave the past where it is because it's gone. You can't change it. When it comes up, mark it well, register it nicely, don't prevent it, and allow it to go and replace it with something better. That's the technique. So your question goes on here. Like depressive waves, they will come in waves. Yes, all these feelings come in waves. You can see them come, you can see them go, but you can restrict it to a few waves and bring up counter waves of your own, during which the traumas, sorrows of the past come to the surface. Yes, we're all suffering from traumas and so on and so forth. We don't have to continuously regurgitate them. We don't have to bring them up. We don't have to play the old records time and time again. We can play something new and joyful and interesting. Why not? And so, is it the grace that brings them to light? The grace of memory is there, yes. To clean them up, no. The cleaning up is we don't attend to them directly, only indirectly. We fill up with something else. And that something else has a cleansing effect. Ultimately, it has a cleansing effect of all the unconscious areas. It takes time, it takes patience. The goal is to purify the mind. The unconscious mind, where we operate mainly from, we cannot tackle directly. We can only insert things in the conscious mind that settle down by repetition on the habit level, through constant practice. Now, when we talk about constant practice, in yoga as a terminology, as a technique, as a way of enacting the principles of the Vedanta, by practice we mean practice constantly of discernment. That is, registering things properly, looking at things in a proper light, in a more balanced way, not in an exaggerated way. Balancing the exaggerated emotions by seeing things as they are. And if you see things as they are, you'll only see the Lord of the universe. You won't see anything else. There's nothing else to see. Our Vedanta philosophy says there's only one being there. There's no other thing. And the Atman is one with it. And then what is this experience that we call our life psychological, physical, material, otherwise, this field of experience, it is all mithya. It is all an appearance, looking like something solid. So we have to continuously practice this discernment, this viveka. And then the other thing is we have to let go. We have to detach. Practice means detachment, discernment, but you don't have to worry about detachment if you're a devotee. Attachment to God means detachment from other things. How do you conquer a shadow? You can't attack it. You can't swear at it. You can't ambush it. And shadow is psychological speech for all these old friends, all these old traumas and so on and so forth. And they dog us all the time. They're there. If we're not careful, they'll overtake us. So how do we deal with these things? We don't. We turn toward the sun. And when we turn toward the sun, the shadow follows like an obedient child. We don't even look at it. So attaching the mind and your emotions to God. So the person I had the conversation with, I said, a devotee does not require tapasya. A devotee need not struggle. All a devotee has to do is increase their love of God. The rest will sort itself out. That's all. So what should we do about this? Let us see, read the question further. So what is the best attitude to adopt in these cases? I think we covered this. And relive the emotions? No. Reliving the emotions compounds it. A problematic friend comes, please visit again, please visit again, please visit. No. If you have to visit, visit once, please. And then go off. And every time you visit, I'll invite you in and invite you out and replace it with new friends. Invite 3 more new friends. One old friend comes, then we invite 3 more. Net result of it, I have 2 friends, 2 surpluses. This is called practice. And then go through them? No, we don't have to go through them. No, not at all. We can increase our love of God, increase our positivity, saturate the mind with sattvic thoughts and conversations, try to get high and just observe. We are observing them already. But the observation point, as soon as we stand at the observation point, all that goes. This is the other way of tackling it. A wave of depression came, who or what observed it? As soon as we withdraw to that point of observation where the observer himself or itself stands, the other thing goes. Peace of mind immediately follows. Okay, so I hope I answered your question. Okay, so we now have 15 minutes more for any questions or issues.
So my question here is, like you said, this kind of mind, right? No matter sometimes what we do to try to keep it peace, still it does its own bit, and it comes down to, like in my case, sometimes sleepless nights, for example, right? And how do I overcome that kind of a constant?
You have to change your language and remove the word try.
Yeah.
Try means there's a possibility of failing, and we try too hard because we think there's a monster we have to tackle. And when we lie down to sleep, we worry, how will I do this? In other words, we don't control this negativity because we don't seem to have anything to replace it by. So supposing instead of trying to do something, you let go, then what will happen? Supposing when you lie on your bed to sleep, you imagine that the divine mother or father or friend or whatever your chosen ideal is supporting you. At least the earth is supporting you. The Upanishads tell us that the earth was woven and then occupied by an internal controller, antakarana. Brahman wove material around itself and then entered into it. So when we lie on the bed, surely we should think of some thoughts full of gratitude, full of divine presence, and not try to do anything. It is trying that's preventing you. It's trying that's confusing the mind. The word try is a highly negative word. I'll try to be there next Sunday. It means I may or may not be there. I will be there. I'll be there or I won't be there. See the Irish way? I'll see you next week. It means I'll never see you at all. So we don't tackle the problem directly. Like an animal, you want to train a horse. The mind is something like that, isn't it? The mind, left to itself, will be all over the place. And the Bhagavad Gita and the Kathopanishad will use that example, that analogy of a chariot with horses going all over the place. An uncontrolled mind, in other words, going all over the place, a scattered mind. Patanjali puts it more bluntly. The condition of a scattered mind, that's the so-called normal condition. But what we want to cultivate concentration. So we want the mind to be one-pointed. Ekagra is the word. One-pointed. Do we do it by forcing it? No, that doesn't work. If you try it with a horse, you'll find a rebel horse on your hands. If you try it with a dog, you'll find a rebel dog on your hands that will dislike you and bite you. You make friends with it. Make friends with the mind. The mind knows what to do when properly directed. The mind is saying, please direct me. And you're saying, let me force you. There's a better technique. So if I want to make friends with the dog, don't look it in the eye. Don't try to do anything. Look away from it. Make the dog feel comfortable. Put your hand out. Let the dog explore you. Let it sniff your hand. Let it lick your fingers. And then use those fingers and explore the back of its ear and stroke it nicely. Then it moves up to you some more. Then it wants the head being stroked and patted, the rest of the body, and so on and so forth. Now it will sit right by you, look up at you, and say, please tell me what to do. I want to please you. The mind is exactly the same thing. So we have to talk to the mind. There's a technique used. When Swami Vivekananda as Naran sang for the first time to Ramakrishna, it was a song called, Oh My Mind. Oh my mind, why do you linger in a foreign land? Why don't you go home? There will be robbers on the way. Greed and anger and lust and so on and so forth. But there'll be good rest houses. Keep holy company in those rest houses and make your way on. You can imagine climbing a mountain. And there'll be rest houses on the way, provided nicely for you free of charge. But there'll be the danger of robbers. The rest houses will prevent it, and your diligence will prevent it, because you are armed with the sword of discrimination. You're armed with all the noble values and divine grace, enabling you to continue the journey. The South Indian songwriter Tyagaraja, he writes a song, translated, Choose, O Mind. He's confronted, he's being given a royal invite to attend a feast. Now he has to attend to the mind. Oh, my mind, do you want to taste all these things, delicious as they are? But they'll be perishable. After the feast, then what? Or do you want to saturate yourself in the glorious taste of the divine nectar of the holy name and holy company? In his case, Rama was his ideal. Which do you want? Democratically, choose which way you want. See which one is better, more beneficial, sweeter. Naturally, he was a saint. And the mind chose naturally the nectar and sweetness of the divine. So don't struggle against the mind. Don't create a fight with the mind. That's the lesson. Don't struggle with the mind. The mind is not a combatant. The mind is pliant and willing. Neuroplasticity is the neurological term for it. The brain. Mind, brain, we won't get into the argument which is which. They're both material and both can be mastered. Master the mind, you master the brain. So don't battle. Learn to increase. You see, the temptation is, all right, let me have a kind of bargaining process. Supposing I'm in the state of depression, then what to do? Let me do something religious. Let me repeat the whole Lalita Sahasrara every day. Let me do this, let me do that, let me do the other thing. But you see, all of this is just superficial stuff with a hopelessness behind it, hoping desperately something will work somewhere. No, it won't. It won't, because there's no let go in it. You have to let go. When you let go, something useful and glorious flows through. It's already flowing. So we have to constantly tune the mind into the glory of the self or God. The art of tuning the mind is what we call spirituality. It requires practice without any tension or anxiety in it. Enjoying it, having a sporting attitude toward it. So we have about 5 minutes left. I hope that helped. Okay, so there's a question about energy just formulated for me. You want me to mute the microphone? Just hold on while I listen to one question. So yesterday I gave a small demonstration about energy as it's captivated and flowing through the body. And so naturally, according to the yogis, energy, the term is prana, is a universal energy. Anything that moves is prana is responsible for it. It's that which makes things move. And in the body, it can be channeled usefully. But again, the highest, most subtle form of that energy is psychic energy, otherwise called thought. So by channeling thought properly, accompanied by the appropriate feeling, we can immediately create, an art. All the saints have a halo around. So we can create an aura around ourselves and protect ourselves from any negativity, any negative energy, by making sure we're always topped up and charged, like a battery, charged with divine illumination, thoughts, and energy, charged with sattvic thoughts. And those sattvic thoughts enable a constant flow of divine grace to flow in us, through us, and beyond us. So thank you. If there are no other questions, we'll leave it there. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.